Do 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 do. I don't know what it is about this music, but it just cracks me up.
I miss being on the road, you know.
You know what? Yeah, I'll switch character classes. What's going on, guys? I'm waiting for Lewis to get in here. I'm hoping Lewis will get in here fairly quickly. Because I'm doing this video not just for you guys, but I'm doing it for, you know, Lewis as well. I'm pretty sure Lewis will have fun hearing me talk about some of the incredible adventures of Van Helsing, you know, the lore behind it. Yeah, that's a man's jam. Skywalking. Wee. I don't I don't even know why I did that. Yeah, 'cause it's a man's jam. Skywalking. Wee. I don't know. I've been in a weird mood, like, all of today. Okay. That works for me. Whee! Oh, come on, Lewis. Well, I was waiting for Lewis, but where is he? Come on, Lewis. Always have to laugh at that. But until then, let's go kill some monsters. Sorry, somebody sent me a funny video. Yeah, I was saying, guys, let me see if I can get a hold of Lewis. Because, oh, there you are. I was about ready to try to track you down. I'm like, thought something happened to you for a second. Yeah, I don't know why it... Oh, wait, that's right. Never mind. I was about ready to say, like, I'd about ready to track you down. I'm like, okay, surely he shows up after, like, a couple of seconds after I do a vid. It weirded me out for a second. I don't even know why I'm using the flamethrower. My little spider bots are going to kill them all. But, I don't know, I'm just goofing off. But yeah, for any of you other guys who are watching this, you know, I'm gonna basically be explaining the lore kind of behind the Incredible Adventures of Van Helsing. Not only for the people that are interested in purchasing it, but also just because I think it's kind of something fun, especially. You know, especially since, you know, like me, Lewis loves, you know, lore in certain games. And the lore in this is actually what attracted me to it, more so than just it being a Diablo clone. Because obviously, you know, the name Van Helsing, you know, anybody who's a fan of classic literature, you're like, oh, this is actually quite, you know, quaint. Yeah, basically the story behind this, at least from what people have told me, and from what I've observed, the game itself, Lewis, basically starts off as you are Van Helsing. However, you're not the Van Helsing, but rather you are Junior. You're the son of Van Helsing. Your dad has long since retired monster hunting. And they don't acknowledge Dracula, but rather they acknowledge that instead of Dracula, Europe was terrorized by a coven of vampire princes. And so, not only that, but your dad also was responsible for invoking what is known as the Pact of... Let me pause the game for a second so I can take a cup of coffee. Ooh. But your dad invoked what is called, you know, the pact between man and monster, or the pact of man and monster, where basically no monsters were allowed to interfere with man's world, and men weren't allowed to poach, kill, or kill any monsters. Basically, your dad made a peace treaty. And your dad left the fictional city of Borgovia, which the entire trilogy takes place in. It's all one continuous story among 3 games. Yeah, I know, right? Especially if I'm going to be explaining this stuff. But no, you as Van Helsing, or Van Helsing Jr., you're going to the fictional country of Borgovia, which is the main place that your dad liberated. And you get a letter addressed to your... But from the monsters as well. Many of the creatures of Borgovia have actually reached out to your dad for help. Because not only has the pact of man and beast been broken, but the scientists that your dad actually entrusted Borgovia to have actually gone insane. They've gone power hungry and are starting to disrupt the natural order of the world. Meaning, they are basically kidnapping monsters and experimenting on them. And also killing any peasants and people that are trying to stop and interfere with them. Basically, the whole science gone wrong scenario. And as Junior, you are attacked by bandits, which you later found out are the lackeys of the scientists, or they're just trying to kill you, period. But you also later find out that one of the scientists was actually your father's closest friend, a man named, Fumagati. Trying to make it sound, Italian. But Fumagati has gone mad, and by the end of the game, when you go to face him as the final boss in the first game, which I'm playing right now, Fumagati has killed all of his allies, stolen all of their scientific designs, and basically has made himself high dictator of the town of Borgovia. So you have to face him in a giant mechanized automaton, which he calls his Doomsday Automaton, which basically, think like, a steampunk-powered version of Metal Gear Rex. Like, he's firing rockets at you, he has giant buzzsaws, he throws everything at you. What's worse is, because of his genetic experiments, he has lobotomized and mechanized werewolves, various automatons, etc. and so forth. Actually, I'll actually because I'm in one of the starting areas right now, which leads to this. Get out of here. And I am, by the way, playing as the Arcane Mechanic, which is basically the steampunk or science-powered, like, hunter class. So I'm just going around mowing these things down with my flamethrower. I have little spider minions that I can summon. Little automaton creatures of my own. But where was I? Oh yeah. So as you're going through the game, you're starting to realize, okay, you start off in Morkova, which, small town, small village, it's on the way, you pass through there, then you go from Creekwood, which is where I've been at here, you rescue the mayor, then you go through the Gallows Bog, which is basically just like the testing ground that you see from from my 3 class guide videos. You go through there, you go through the orichalcum, which is basically, you know, the magical material that most of these steampunk machines are powered by, and is also a magical ore. You go through there, face a bunch of spiders, face a giant mechanized tunneling worm, and then you travel all the way to the Dreadworks, which is basically the square of Borgova, which has now become a sprawling industrial metropolis under Fulmagati's rule. And then the second half of the game, you are operating out of your father's secret lair in the sewer tunnels of Borgova. And it's funny you mentioned Dracula, though, because they do talk about the vampire princes and stuff, but you actually one of your closest allies is Count Vlados, who himself is a vampire, but was a vampire that wanted to see the princes fall long before the first game. So he was actually the vampire responsible for helping your dad actually overthrow them. Oh, we lost Lewis. I hate when like that happens. Like, I'll be explaining something and then I'll realize that later on. I mean, it's not like you can't catch the video later, but I just feel like it's rude to not like explain this stuff by hand to him. But, yeah, we wait for him to come back or acknowledge that he's back for a second. In the meantime, I need to go check something real quick. Sorry, take a short social media break here because I'm kind of curious. Because people have been somewhat blowing up my phone. But anyway, yeah, let me roam around here. I'll show you guys at least the lair.
Everything is quiet.
So, you got an inventor, and the generator, and ooh, we get to walk through the tunnels. Walk through here. I don't know why, there's nothing I can fight, but I'm just gonna roam through here for a second. Ah, crap, I hit the wrong button. Oh, okay. I was sitting there for a second, I'm like, what's going on? I'm like trying to multitask at once. Oh, there we go, the thing blew up. But, anyway, as I was saying, yeah, Count Vlados was actually, he was the guy that worked with your dad to overthrow the vampire princes. And he is also the one that predominantly sent your dad the letter to come help out in Borgova. And as you find out in the second act, it goes much deeper. Not only is Fulmagati taken over the city, but you actually end up becoming the pseudo-factor, like, you know, savior slash leader of the resistance of Borgova. There's more a reference. You face enemies that are called, like, you know, Bedlam Bruisers or something like that, but they're like these lobotomized type Frankenstein monster guys with giant iron hands, but they don't show up till the second game. Are you good, or do you need me to wait for a second, Lewis? Because I'll just fiddle around if you need to, like, do something real quick. I mean, that's why I did put chill stream kind of thing, because I just wanted to roam around, kill monsters, and preoccupy myself as I'm explaining this stuff. Okay. But yeah, Count Vlados is, and yes, you know, his name hilariously is Vlados, so it's like Vlad. And listen to his voice acting. His voice acting is what makes me laugh.
The resistance is taking back the streets of Borgova. Isn't that marvelous? All those brave soldiers shedding their sweet, delicious, spicy blood for their city.
And what are you going to do? Give advice from the dangerous depths of your armchair?
Oh, you know me too well, my lady. Coordination and strategic planning. It's a difficult burden, but someone has to do it.
Your determination is remarkable. If you need me, I'll be outside, fighting a real battle.
I love the dialogue in this game just because, like, the witty banter between some of the characters is actually quite hilarious. And I think the thing, Lewis, as you watch this game that you'll enjoy is they put a bunch of pop culture references. Like, for example, playing in Van Helsing 2, you're walking around, you meet the captain of the guard, he's just walking around randomly, and Van Helsing, you know, like, the captain of the guard in Van Helsing 2, like, the resistance captain, he just goes, you're like, you look lost, Captain. And the captain's like, he goes, indeed, sir. He goes, I'm curious why the layer is bigger on the inside. You know, or the layer is bigger on the inside. Basically, he makes a reference that the layer is kind of like the TARDIS from Doctor Who, which I thought was kind of funny. And they put little pop culture references like that in there. Like, one of the first missions, you have to free, like, this inventor to help him with that'll help you with the resistance. In the second game, and you come upon these cells. As, like, a side quest, you can, like, free more, like, resistance fighters that have been captured by the main adversary of the second game, General Harker, who is a descendant of the Harker family. But I'll get more into that in a second, because I'm explaining more of the lore of the first game before I get into the second one. But you meet this guy, you meet this guy, and he starts talking suspiciously like a certain character. He's like, "Let me out." He goes, I'm a world-renowned psychologist. I don't eat people. That is all a lie." And then when you free him, he goes, "I'm having an old friend for dinner." And Katerina, who is following you around, your ghostly ally, you can't see her. Let me go into a thinner light. There we go. Your ghostly ally, Katerina, goes, "I think we just made a very terrible mistake." And when you break the box that was in a cell, it's like Mask of the Cannibal. So you basically like a huge nod to Hannibal Lecter, basically. Like, they put little tidbits like that into the games, and it makes it so much more, like, fun and hilarious. Because it's one of those things to where, like, the game knows it's over the top and silly, so it doesn't take itself too awfully seriously. It kind of has a little bit of fun every now and again. But Katarina, which I'll get into her since you can kind of see her, Lewis. Katarina's a very interesting character. Katarina's a very interesting character because Katarina is your ghostly companion. She is the ghost of a 16th century noblewoman who was beheaded. You can't really see it until I go into the menu here. Let me go into the menu and you'll probably be able to see a little more clearly, because the top-down view doesn't really like show what she looks like very clearly. But like, see, Katarina, she has no neck. Like, if you can see close enough, her head is severed and ethereally floating above her body. But Katarina is basically, she is a ghost that is bound to the Van Helsing family by her father. So she's basically, I wouldn't say your slave, but like, she more or less, she is indentured to you until you magically basically she's like the genie from Aladdin. There we go. I was trying to think of the comparison for some reason. Basically, she's kind of like Genie from Aladdin. Like, one of Aladdin's wishes is he sets Genie free. It's the same kind of core concept with Katarina. Katarina, basically, she is bound to you and does whatever you wish. She doesn't like it, but it's better than her being a vengeful spirit and floating around for all of eternity. Essentially, yeah, she's basically kind of like a ghostly ally and guide. She's there to help Van Helsing when he can't figure out, like, certain tidbits, or, like, you know, certain bits of history. And she was a noblewoman, and what really makes me laugh is they reference a lot of things that since since Katarina has been around since the 16th century, that she, even when she was still alive, she kind of dabbled in the occult and black magic and, like, you know, Wiccanism, which was extremely super taboo in that time period, and still kind of is, because this game takes place in the 19th century. Like, it's an alt 19th century, like, you know, history thing. So instead of Dracula, it was the vampire princes, and your dad was a master monster hunter. Like, your dad fought... This is how badass Abraham Van Helsing is in this game's universe. This guy took on, you know, the king werewolves, took on the vampire princes to free Borgovia, actually took on evil voodoo witch doctors, and apparently, according to alleged lore, it's never been covered until the third game, but your dad even fought H.P. Lovecraft-inspired, like, Cthulhu-esque, like, lost gods. Like, that's... This version of Abraham Van Helsing is a badass. To the point that he even fought, like, old gods. And actually won. So it's like, you as Junior, you're constantly mistaken for your dad because of the name. And you're trying to step out of his shadow. That's been like a core... It's kind of like a core side theme of the games. Is you're just annoyed that everybody is coming to you based on your name, as opposed to coming to you because you're a skilled hunter. So it's always something that Katarina even kind of, like, you know, jabs and pokes at you with. You know, that you're nothing like your father. I mean, there's even after you kill the giant tunneling worm, Katarina's like, oh, you know, your father would be proud. And Van Helsing's like, my father would criticize my sloppy fighting stance and tell me that I'm not. Well, it isn't until the third game, but they kind of hinted a lot of, like, Lovecraftian, like, references and stuff. Not like actual references, but they just say that Van Helsing has fought a lot of ethereal and, you know, Edric and like otherworldly creatures that exist beyond the realm of monsters. Like some that go like deeper into like ancient history, like old gods and stuff. that, you know, he used the power of the occult and science to kind of defeat a lot of these creatures. Which, I mean, it's not a bad idea. It's an interesting core concept. But, yeah, basically when Van Helsing created the Pact, he left Borgova in the hands of Professor Fumagati and all the other scientists. And over time, they became corrupt. And basically, yeah, they started basically killing off half of these monsters and experimenting with them. And you'll see in a second what I mean. Like, yeah, you know, creating mechanized, like, monsters and creatures that just... And also, I know I'm all over the place, but also, interesting fact, as you can tell with Katarina works more like a wraith or a banshee. Like, whenever she's mad, she turns into a monster and basically just... She's got two modes. She's got a melee and a range. Like, right now you're seeing melee, which she turns into, like, this... She turns into, like, you know, this almost, like, really creepy Celtic banshee type creature. You can't see it because of the top-down view, but... She has, like, snake-like tendrils. She almost has a Gorgon-like appearance, like sharp talons, sharp whipping tail, and a monstrous, almost like a demonic headpiece, I guess you could call it. Like, she just viciously bites, stabs, and claws at enemies. She does... And of course, Ghost is where she doesn't fight in combat, but rather she gives you boost damages and all that stuff. So she basically becomes ethereal. Ranged, she becomes more kind of like a banshee or a wraith type character. So she fires, you know, ethereal ectoplasmic blasts at her enemies. So she has that kind of thing going. So she's more than just like your ghostly companion that follows you. She actually will help you in combat. And the second game, her role extends to where you can send her into town to go buy potions and stuff. Like, she'll actually go shopping. So she serves a lot of multi-purposes throughout the game series as your companion. She's basically like a hybrid ghost, yes. And I'm about to show you probably one of the core mechanics of the game that I think you and a lot of other people will find interesting, which is the ink. And I'll show you the ink here. And what is the ink? The ink, you know, and also this is why I like Borgova as a town, because Borgova is the only place where the ink or the ethereal realm between our world and the next. Yeah, it's called the ink because it's the ethereal world. It can take place correspondingly next to ours or a whole different ethereal plane. Like, if you just look out here, you'll see like floating rock structures and everything, and the ink is basically just like an alternate dimension, basically. It's just an alternate dimension that just kind of floats in an area that is between space and time. So you basically you're basically in a realm that exists outside the conventional means of space and time. And a lot of people, including science, basically are trying to explore this, you know, this world that really doesn't exist outside the conventional means of the universe. So, like, it's a whole other ethereal realm. I guess you could count the strongmen as Frankenstein-esque monsters, you know, guys with balls and chains. So let me summon my spider minions. And what's weird is the ink also has a lot of creatures. So like ethereal wraiths, as you see here, like the Baronesses. And
I need healing potions.
let me throw down some turrets because they're kind of whooping me a little bit here. So you face, and not only that, but the ink is where like a lot of creatures and explorers have kind of gone missing, or they just kind of, you know, it's basically just like a realm where you can easily be trapped if you're not careful. And sometimes the ink takes on a life of its own, which is why, you know, a lot of travelers in this universe have always been forewarned, you know, hey, don't basically stay in the ink for too long. Otherwise, you know, you'll kind of be trapped in, you know, this limbo-like state. So it's just like another cool little feature, like, you know, the whole, like, science is trying to understand, you know, the mystic. So there's a lot of different layers inside of this game's universe that, you know, Neocore Games has kind of touched upon that they might do in a possible sequel. And there's so many different, like, enemies that exist outside of, outside of what you see inside this game.
Some healing
Like
potions
this
nice.
only scratches the surface of what this game series actually offers. The second game gets a lot more crazy because you're facing dryads, you're facing even more mechanical monsters. Like where I'm at right now, which is like the museum setting and everything. This is like the later part of the game where you're taking the fight to Fulmagati. You're basically like sieging the city and stopping his monstrous automatons. But I'm kind of trying to encompass all this stuff for you, so like, you know, it gets you to look at it more, and B, you know, it fascinates you, but yeah, you know, so let's see, covered Katarina, covered some of the beginning stuff, but yeah, you basically, as you progress through the game, you start to see that, yeah, you know, Fulmagati has like fully lost his mind. Like somewhere along the way, he just went power hungry and crazy. And what ended up happening was, one of the things that he did was he exiled General Harker, who is the main adversary for the second game. And there we are. Mechanized, cyber-enhanced werewolves, or like steampunk-powered werewolves. Kind of a scary prospect, but they are one of the more like, you know,
I don't
packaged
have any
enemies
healing
of the
potions.
game. And as you can tell, they are not to be trifled with. Especially towards the later part of the game, they just kind of start throwing wolves of steam, basically. There we go. That's actually a better way of putting it. But yeah, you pretty much have a lot of, and like I said, this is a trilogy release. This isn't just one isolated game, but all three games take place concurrently. But as I said, all three games are one continuous story. So like, this is the beginning where you come to Borgova, you liberate the city, you stop Fulmagati's rule, but in the ending cutscene, after you beat Fulmagati, General Harker is shown blowing up the Palace of Machines, which is where the final boss fight takes place, and he says the game is afoot, Van Helsing. And the whole second game that I'm playing through is Harker has now started a civil war in Borgova. After being exiled by the Professor, when you defeat the Professor, Harker takes his opportunity, being a master strategist and general. He comes in to put the blame on you for Borgova's state, tries to crush you in the resistance, and the whole point of that game is you are stopping Harker from basically starting a coup and civil war to benefit himself and his own selfish ambitions. And along the way, you end up meeting your closest ally, which is this masked, like, ethereal or ghostly being called Prisoner 7. And Prisoner 7 basically is helping you throughout the game to stop Harker and keep you one step ahead of the General. This is where number 3 kind of takes place, because at the end of number 2, you go into the center of the ink to face the Dryad Queen, but also to face Harker. So you're facing 2 enemies at once, like just full-scale, massive battle. You come to find out that Prisoner 7 has been using you as a pawn all this time. And that basically Prisoner 7 has been plotting to get his hands on a device that's at the center of the ink that your father actually planted a long time ago. A very dangerous artifact from Borgovia's past that would basically ascend somebody to godhood if used in the right way. And when you progress in the 3rd game, from what I've seen story-wise, you find out Prisoner 7 is the last of those set of, of Lovecraftian old gods that your father had secretly banished and had hoped would never be resurrected. And Prisoner 7, when he regains his powers, he basically tells you that Fulmagati had captured him when he was in a weakened state and experimented on him to the point that his powers became null. And that he was actually exiled and imprisoned in the lab, abandoned because Fulmagati just left him. So he was like the only inmate in this entire laboratory. In a failed experiment, or an experiment that Fulmagati realized was too dangerous for even him. And so basically you unleash a being of terror, an old god that's going to not only have ambitions for Borgovia, but the entire world. And actually has been plotting for many millennia revenge against your father for killing all of his kind. And so instead of killing your father, he's like, well, I'm going to kill you to stick it to your dad. So you basically, in the final fight, you go towards this ethereal dungeon plane that is within the ink, because somehow he can alter reality or some weird thing like that. I haven't fully watched the entirety of the story for it to play out. I've only gotten bits and pieces, but basically your dad basically had purposely kept these beings locked away. He thought he got rid of all of them because they had the ambition to rule the entirety of Borgovia and the world. And so after you kill this monster, this ethereal being, Prisoner 7 in his powered-up godly form, which you later find out he's the god, he's the Borgovian old god that has actually been referenced all throughout 2, which was, I think, what was it, I think it was pronounced Choristi the Deathless, the Deathless, not Deadless, but Deathless. It's like this ancient being. Yeah, I know, it's insane, like the level of detail that they try to add to lore, but basically after you beat him, and you finally have killed the last of these Borgovian old gods, these evil old gods, that you know, that finally Van Helsing's like, you know, we've had a good journey. My adventures, I think, have come to an end. I'm going to retire early. So that way, you know, I don't end up with a fate like your father, because Van Helsing kind of references that his dad, now at 90, is kind of battered, broken, and just wheelchair bound and living out the last of his days. And so you basically, Van Helsing at the end mutters the ancient, you know, oath-breaking code and tells Katarina, you're free. And they basically leave it up for a fourth one if Neocore Games wants to continue the story and give him more incredible adventures. And Katarina's like, you know, she goes, oh, that's sweet, you know, I can go towards the light, I'm finally free. And then she just kind of laughs and she goes, nah. She goes, what would you do without me? She goes, I appreciate you freeing me from, you know, from my bonds and oath. She said, but somebody has to keep you out of trouble. So it's like the fourth game opens up with the fact that Van Helsing and Katarina aren't just, you know, the whole master-servant thing, but rather now they kind of stand as equals. They now have come to rely on each other, which the third game ties up all these loose ends from game one here all the way to the third, and kind of a full character arc. The fourth game would be interesting, but the problem is, from what people have said, you know, they kind of, from game 1 through 3, tied everything up nicely with all the characters' arcs. So game 4 would have to be its own kind of standalone entity, with, you know, the two of these characters, you know, kind of having a new adventure that would span somewhere else.
I can't do that.
But it's kind of crazy.
I don't have any healing
like, you know,
potions.
and I hate these things with a passion. These little, like, floating assault bots. Like, they are the more annoying enemies of the game. Because they will literally, they attack in swarms, and they will actually kill the crap out of you. In a way, yeah, you know, it's kind of God of War-esque. So they would have to tell, yeah, you know, a new story, a new setting, and etc. or so forth. And these things, these prototypes, they're just creepy, long whipped-armed, like, beings and creatures. Okay, now that's killed. But yeah, it's like, I'll have to. I haven't really like watched a full playthrough of the third one, mainly because I kind of want to play it for myself. Yeah, I know. Like I said, as it goes on, it just gets crazier with some of the enemy designs and variations. So it's like you literally, right? It's just creepy. Oh, I was trying to avoid that, but never mind. Why did I jump into the fray? I swear I keep hitting the wrong button. There we go. Yeah, but yeah, that's, I mean, it's just little tidbits like here and there, but yeah, you know, you got like the ink, which is like, you know, the ethereal netherworld. You have science gone wrong in the first game. The second game, you're putting down a military coup and rebellion. And then the third game is Borgovia is in shambles and is living at the, you know, booted heel of an ancient evil thought to be dead. So yeah, you as Van Helsing really kind of just go from one bad situation to the other in all three games. It's just all one and that's the thing that I love about this series, is it's one continuous story after the other. So when you defeat Fulmagati here in the the Palace of Machines, then you automatically start right after Harker has blown a hole through the building and you're down and you're crumpled down below, to which after that action, Prisoner 7 frees you, and then you go back to your lair, you try to stop Harker, and it's just the whole point of the game is you trying to stop him, period. Like, just stopping his whole, like, rebellion, coup type scenario. And that's... And then... and then the third game pretty much just wraps it up with you fulfilling your destiny as Van Helsing and stopping the ultimate evil, and then, they just kind of left the trilogy from there, with one tie-in being, a game called Death Trap. And shortly after that, they haven't really announced anything else. They've mainly been working on a lot of their Warhammer games and other series that they've been, kind of working on. So it's really interesting, kind of it's an unofficial sequel. They've not really called it Van Helsing, they just called it Death Trap. Like, it's basically a giant tower defense game. But a lot of people have said that a lot of people that have played it said that technically, it's kind of a Van Helsing game because, it has a lot of the core mechanics of the tower defense part of these games, and that it also pretty much, it pretty much has kind of the same setting or similar fashion to these games. But yeah, I like this series for a lot of different reasons. Mainly just because, it has a fun aesthetic feel to it. Like, a lot of people have referred to this game as Diablo Light. Like, it is a game that it doesn't necessarily have a new game or any new game type replayability stuff. Like, the only things that they have, and I'll show it in the menu, other than, respawning enemies just to try to get loot or just to stress, stress relieve and kill time, is they just have scenario mode, which works like adventure mode in Diablo 3, where you pick different scenarios and you just try to do a loot grab, and then you got never-ending story, which you restart the story, but enemies are a higher level. And you pretty much just, the more you progress in the story, the harder the game gets. So it's just one of those kinds of things. Wait, what I know that Warhammer is like a tabletop game thing like D&D, but I didn't know that Warhammer has games. Yes, actually, believe it or not, Games Workshop, which is like the big tabletop store. I don't know if that extends to Europe, but basically one of the big tabletop game companies here in the US called Games Workshop took a lot of their tabletop games, and a lot of it being, games like Warhammer and what was it, because they have different ones. They have ones that take place in the traditional Warhammer, which is like the futuristic, you're fighting aliens, kind of mech marine, kind of setting. And then they have ones that are called the Vermintide series, the Vermintide being where you play as, it's kind of like Left 4 Dead, but set in medieval times, where you play as different warriors and classes, and you're basically trying to fight this giant upscourge of these mutant rat creatures, these humanoid rat creatures that are trying to decimate all of the countryside. So you play as a dwarven ranger, a cavalier mercenary, like a female, you know, Celtic type witch, or a Celtic forest witch, and you know, all these different things, you know, like an elven assassin, you know, etc. or so forth. Like, you know, it's, yeah, there's like various games out there that were apparently, you know, tabletop based games that they've either made like, you know, real-time strategy games like the XCOM games, or like, you know, have that Left 4 Dead first person aesthetic feel to them. Like that's kind of the cool part about a lot of, like, you know, indie based companies or games that do a lot of indie-esque like games that they have like a B or A type budget, but they have a lot of story to them and depth. That is kind of sad, but not really surprising. Games Workshop there for a while almost went out of business. I think to a certain extent they make more money off of the games that they actually correspond with, as opposed to like people coming in and getting the actual tabletop sets. But I mean, it's still fun. I actually still to this day, when I went into Games Workshop, I was given a little, you know, like free figure if I wanted to start playing, and even then the guy said, you know, it's a free figure. You can keep it if you want, and I still kept it. I mean, I'm hoping I never lose it, but it was like, it was cool because, like, you know, the guys, you know, in the workshop, they were just like running somebody a tutorial on how to play, like the more like futuristic, the traditional Warhammer games. So like, I got like a little cool infantry guy that I kind of keep with me, just to remind me in case I ever choose to want to go down that route, which I probably never will, because I'm not the biggest board game fanatic, but I find it interesting, you know, just because I like that's the one thing. I'm a traditional video game player, and I say this not to you, but to like anybody else watching this later on, if you're at this point in the video, which if you are, good for you tolerating my voice. If not, no harm, no foul. But if you are by that far and you're somebody who plays, you know, D&D and, you know, Warhammer and all those, like, you know, tabletop-based games, kudos to you guys, because I don't think I can get into it, but at the same time, I like watching people play it for the strategy and the fantasy of it, because it is certainly very intriguing to at least, like, sit on people having a session and just kind of watch how, you know, they roll the dice and strategize and kind of get all their pieces set on the field. And I guess that's just the RPG nut in me, because I like watching RPG based kind of stuff. Like, I like the whole building your character and, you know, setting a precedent for their skills and how everything goes, and that just always kind of fascinates me, and I think that's just also the creative in me. You know, the creative in me kind of looks at that stuff, and it's very appealing. You know, they're talking about the idea of doing something like that, but they just don't know if people would really be into it. More or less, the closest thing that you get to something like that is listening to, like, you know, Dan Harmon, or like, you know, the Geek and, you know, Sundry doing, like, you know, these like guest dungeon sessions, like the tabletop version of like the tabletop version of World of Warcraft. They had Terry Crews playing for the Horde. And I thought that was just, to me, kind of hilarious. Like, you know, Terry Crews is playing as an orc. And as I later found out, believe it or not, despite being big and muscular, Terry Crews actually is an avid D&D player. Which, I never knew that. I found that kind of interesting. Little nugget for Terry Crews fans. He actually plays D&D. But wait, what am I? Oh, I forgot that I have to set Katarina back to Ghost, or back out of Ghost. They have like a trading card, but they recently, in recent years, have kind of somewhat come out with like a tabletop-esque, like, you know, Warcraft board game, or a game that, you know, is within like the WoW universe. But it's like a minute one. They don't like go super crazy into it. Okay, let me switch these around because this is confusing me. I'm used to X being like my main attack button. There we go. That's a little better. Yeah, it... A big shiny red button. I wonder what it does. Probably summons death. Yeah, of course I am. Yeah, you couldn't tell by the button prompt that well, then again, no, I can see it being confusing because some of the button prompts, they do make PC controllers now that kind of play like the PlayStation or Xbox controllers. I was gonna say summons death, but I guess you can only hit that button once, but when you hit it, basically a whole lot of like Tinker Toy, like, you know, soldier archetypes, you know, come and try and gun you down. It's like a massive mob of them. Be gone, thoughts. You know, it's funny. Out of all of the classes, I love the arcane mechanic the most, but out of all the classes, I gotta say, and I think they did it on purpose since it was the vanilla class of this game before they decided to, you know, before they decided to make it all enhanced, because, yeah, PS4 is getting the later version of this, but originally the Hunter was the only class that you actually could choose from in Van Helsing. And then later they released the Thaumaturge, and then they released the Arcane Mechanic last. And each one has a different mission tied to it. So like the Thaumaturge, you had to go to like the Ink to go rescue some gem for the priest in the town, and you know, for the Arcane Mechanic, you had to kill a bunch of like steampunk-powered machines, and so like there's different missions. So like you go to the Mission Hive and kill a bunch of machines as the Arcane Mechanic, and I think for the Thaumaturge, you get a mission where you can go like raid like the layer for like, you know, for like what's called the Pale Gentlemen, which are like these dark alchemists. So it's kind of interesting that depending on what class you play, you may or may not get extra missions. Because as the Hunter, you just played the generic vanilla game, and that's fine. You'll still level up regardless. Ah, there we go. Yeah, look at these ham and eggers. They go to... I always say, you know, with these soldiers, it's funny because, like, they're so easy to kill. These guys are so easy to kill. Like, you could fart on them and they'll die. Like, they're basically just literally like cannon fodder. It's hilarious. And the funny part is the only time that you face spiders is in the mines. But if you're playing as the arcane mechanic, you can destroy a bunch of new machines and spiders come down, because I guess it's an abandoned factory, whatever, you know, hoop-de-doo and whoop-de-la and all that junk. And you got the industrial port, which blah blah blah, the rooftops, the observation point. Let me show you, because the observation point is the setup area before you actually go to face Full Magadi. I want to show you how this is BS. I'm serious. Like, they're like the stereotypical cannon fodder that you could practically one-shot them and they're dead. And you could be like just level 2 and just... You could be like level 2 and just bang, dead. I'm just like... So you could... be, you know... What is BS? Basically, you know, BS is basically just bullshit. It's just... like the shortened terminology for it. So like whenever, and also it's just the more like family friendly way of saying it. So like if I ever say BS, I'm just basically hyphenating and shortening, you know, bullshit. But I'm trying to say it to where like, you know, yeah. Sorry to anybody that watches my videos and you're like, oh my god, all of a sudden, you know, now he's got a potty mouth. It's like, I'm just enunciating and abbreviating. I've kind of gone from, oh, I gotta try to keep my channel super clean, to now I'm like, you know, I don't have to be clean all the time, but I definitely do want to keep some sense of standards. Like, see, this is where it just gets ridiculous. Like, towards the end here, they just start throwing nothing but mobs of enemies at you, and this is especially irritating if you play on hardcore because, you know, 1 life, 1 kill, and you got all this being thrown at you. Right? And that was like actually before I even bought this game, that was like the major complaint that almost everybody that has ever reviewed or played this game has said. The game is beautiful, the game plays great, but it's just the fact that towards the end here, they throw nothing but mobs at you to try to compensate for the idea of not having to create new and expounded enemies. And that kind of bothered a lot of people because they're like, you know, that's ridiculous. That's, you know, that is, you know, malarkey. If you want to use a more fancier term. And the way that these games play out, the first game, even though it's an introduction, the first game, you only level up to level 30. Exactly. So like you go up to level 30 in the first game. Katarina goes up to level 25. You get 10 perks. The second game, I haven't tested the second game, but for Van Helsing, the level cap is 60. The level cap is 60. At least that's what I'm allegedly being told. But Katarina, I'm presuming, is going to go up to 50. I'm hoping. I'm still testing it. I'm still playing through. So, like, this game, for example, your level cap is 30 for the first game. The second game, probably 60 if I had to guess. Yeah, it's level 60 because I remember one of the awards, or, like, you know, in-game trophy things, like, for here, is reach level 60 with each class. So you got 60 in the second game. And what's cool between the first and second game is you can import your character from the first one here to play in the second one. So you can continue the story, basically. However, what I found interesting is the third game doesn't let you port a character over. You have to create a new one. But they're still expanding the story. So it's kind of fascinating. It's kind of interesting in its interpretation.
You look familiar.
Ah, it must be the mask. Different scientist, same lab accident.
I love that bit of dialogue. You look familiar. Oh, it must be the mask. He goes, different scientist, same lab accident.
Cogs und lightning und steam. I can build it.
That is just so stereotypically German that it actually would be considered offensive. But anyway, it gets worse.
What if we put a valve into the generator? Bring me a hammer and a wrench, and I'll fix anything.
It's like this Liam Neeson Scottish type voice. I'm like, what?
Everything is in order. Everything is quiet. We are ready. I never thought I'd be fighting alongside a vampire. Modern times. I'm waiting for your orders, sir. Vive la résistance! For Borgovia!
There we go. And you got refugees, rebel soldiers, and they purposely cut off these areas, like especially here, because that's going to open up in two. Like, they expand your layer as in each game. So, like, you got a small area, and you got, like, little defensive tunnels here on the map. And you got, like, a little area you can go over here with your little vendors. You got stuff to sell. You got, like, your storage chest. Blah, blah, blah. And this is basically cut off, even though they show it. This is only expanded upon in the second game. This is like basically your trophy area where when you collect like certain key items, it will boost you in the game, boost you and your allies, but it'll also have a drawback to where it'll make the enemies stronger. It'll make them more immune to certain attacks. And that's more to be expounded upon in the second game with that area. And then as you go on, other areas will open up in your layer. So like they'll expand it out a little bit. And then even when you go over here, and I'll show you, they got another area that's kind of closed off. You know, they'll start expanding a little bit. And there's eventually an area later on that they build to the layer, like right around here, and this is why I love the second game. I haven't unlocked it yet. Everybody said it's useless, but I still want to use it just because, who wouldn't want to have it? But that area that I just passed by, right where the vendors and stuff are, there's a little catty-cornered area where they build a staple area for you to go in. And are you ready for this, Lewis? This is actually a key feature that they use in the second game. but you can also use it in combat. In the second game, towards the beginning or middle part of the second half of the game, you get a chimera that you can actually summon and use to go into the ink and collect relics and various artifacts for you. And you also get a thing where you can ethereally summon it out of the ink to fight alongside you, and you can level it up, you can make it stronger, you can make it more defensive, can make it quicker. and when I looked at that in Van Helsing 2 and they talked about that, I'm like, my brain couldn't process it for a second. I'm like, I get my own frickin' war beast that I can summon and actually send against my enemies for a short... I don't even care that it's timed. Just the fact that I get to summon my own chimera is awesome in and of itself. Like that is just on another... Like, that's the thing that I'm starting to praise Neocore Games for. Every game they've kind of expanded upon. But a lot of people said that the third game really kind of was a letdown. You know, it wasn't like the second one. Because in the second one, you're actually leading the resistance. As you're on missions, you can send your guys out on missions themselves. And you can basically build your resistance. And what's interesting is, from a story standpoint, how the resistance fare in the game has some effect on the story. So, like, in other words, if the resistance does super poorly, when you get to that final fight between, that final battle between Harker and the Dryad Queen, if the resistance is done poorly, you're going to pretty much be fighting a fight all by yourself, and it's going to be doubly tough. But if the resistance has done well, then the resistance starts beaming in via, like, you know, mobile, like, ink portals, and you'll start having, like, an army fighting alongside you. So it's little tidbits like that that Neocore Games has kind of touched upon and actually kind of expanded upon, to where, like, they give you the option of, you can make Van Helsing an a-hole that nobody likes, or you can make Van Helsing like, hey, he's a monster hunter, but, you know, he doesn't hunt all monsters. He doesn't prejudicially just kill every monster that he sees. You know, he kind of picks and chooses his battles, and is all about, you know, helping people for no reward, just doing the right thing for doing the right thing. And I find that kind of interesting, that that Van Helsing is whatever you want to make him in this game. And what's really interesting is that, you know, in a very storytelling fashion, some of your actions actually can benefit you. For example, early on in the game, when you rescue the mayor from the first town you're in, if you don't kill the werewolves that actually have him, later on in the game, you'll get a special trophy that will boost your stats. And on top of that, when you go into Old Town, which I was in a while ago, you get a pack of werewolves that for a certain amount of distance there will actually ally with you, and so you got an army of werewolves that can basically, like, help you, you know, just rummage through, like, certain parts of the town or break down some of Fulmigati's defenses as you're trying to find a way forward. So it's just little tidbits like that are cool, because it opens up the door for a lot of other, like, different, you know, gameplay aspects. So you can play through it multiple times and still find different new ways of, like, experiencing the game. But I talk about Easter eggs. They have a mission at the beginning of Van Helsing 2 that you'll get a good laugh, a good chuckle out of this, Lewis. They have an entire subquest in the first part of the game where you're leading the resistance, you're trying to push back Harker's forces for, like, you know, a steampunk, you know, foundry. And it's like, oh, the War Council wants you to do this quest, Van Helsing. Okay, what do you need to do? I need you to rescue Private Brian. They have an entire subquest dedicated to saving Private Ryan, or in this case, Private Brian. And it's like, well, what is he? He's an ordinary soldier. Well, why is he important to the War Council? And then it's like, oh, you know, the War Council just loves, you know, I used to be a cook, and, you know, the War Council loves my chocolate cakes, and, you know, but that's hardly a specialty, da-da-da-da-da. And so it's like you have this really ridiculous escort mission to just, like, you know, yeah, like they do a Saving Private Ryan reference where it's like, instead it's like Private Brian. You know, they add a B in there so they can avoid copyright. So it's just, it's little things like that that make Van Helsing cool. Or like, you know, you get to pull Excalibur out of a stone. Like, you just go in there, you see like this giant sword, giant Claymore-esque sword in a stone. And oh, you know, you can't pull it out by hand, so you get some weapon oil, you pull it out, and, you know, oh, it's the mythical sword Excalibur. Little tidbits like that make it hilarious. So the game, you know, it's a very fun series. It's a very daunting series, but it's a very fun one. Because, like I said, it doesn't take itself super, super seriously. Like, it knows that it's not the most, like... It's one of those games to where if they tried to be serious with it, it would be laughably painful. But instead, the game kind of cracks on itself, and it kind of pokes fun at a lot of different pop culture references. Like, when you're doing the ads for Old Town, like, what was it? Like, one of them is like, you know, Pipe's having trouble, call, you know, the Brothers Mario. You know, like, little things like that. It just kind of make the game, you know, a little more interesting and hilarious, because it's like, if you're not playing it, then you're trying to find references that kind of fit within that game's universe. But what was it? What's another one that had me laughing? Oh yeah, they even make a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference, because like you're in one of the science labs and Van Helsing makes the comment to Katarina. He goes, apparently according to this, the scientists finally cracked, you know, the code to the meaning of life, to the meaning of all life and existence in the universe. Katarina's like, that's ridiculous. Nobody can ever figure a mathematic numeral. Okay, Van Helsing, I'll bite. What is the numeral? 42. They reference, like, little things like that, they just kind of reference. Fun. So I mean, it's a fun series, and I definitely and I wish it gains more traction than it does. But hopefully by myself and many others who have played it, you know, it kind of starts to gain traction. I mean, obviously all three games have been released on the Xbox One, so, you know, it's had to gain some popularity. But it just also kind of annoys me. You know, people have been asking them, and Neocore has kind of been mummed to the point, so I'm like, okay, is this like an Xbox exclusive deal? Because I'm not complaining. I'm glad that the first two games are on there, but it's like I kind of want to play the third one so I can have the complete trilogy. But otherwise, it's a very fun series. You know, it's the lore. You know, the lore behind it's just very fascinating. You know, that it's an alt 19th century where it's like weird and mad science and steampunk are going on, and you know, but it's like, you know, magic versus science. Like, you know, they have references to the arcanic, to actually, another cool Easter egg, you'll laugh at this. They have a part where you're going through, like, the cave-ins, and this is Van Helsing 2. In Van Helsing 2, you come to, like, this broken train track, and there's this light shining out of the cave-in tunnels, and it's over the body of, like, this gray-cloaked wizard. And when you pick it up, you know, you pick up his staff and his sword. And what was it, like Van Helsing goes, honestly, who fights with a staff and a sword? Katarina's like, yeah, she goes, either be a wizard or be a fighter. He goes, and there, Van Helsing goes, and there's also some notes here. He goes, tried to hold off the horde, but apparently told them that they would not be able to pass. He goes, but tragically, as I write this with my dying breath, they passed me. This is like at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and I'm just sitting here snickering loudly. Because I'm like, they even threw in, not just one, but they threw in 2 Lord of the Rings references. In this one, in the first one, you run across Donovoy Baggins, and he starts talking about my precious, and you pick up the one evil ring. So it's like, this game makes a reference to Golem and the One Ring, and then the second game, you're looting the body of the Grey Wizard, or, i.e. Gandalf. And that to me is utterly hilarious. Like I said, this game throws so many pop culture references and jokes that it's actually absurdly hilarious. Like, you'll be playing through it just to figure out and find all the different, key references that, they're alluding to. It's it's definitely a fun series, but I'm kind of starting to get hungry, and also, yeah, the One Ring to rule them all. But I'm kind of starting to get hungry. It's almost 1 o'clock, and in a couple of hours, I'm going to be heading to work, so I'm probably going to just go ahead, stop the video right here, Lewis. I feel like I've explained as much of the lore, if not the entirety of the lore and the game's storylines. But, I mean, it's a fun series, and it's a very underrated series, because everybody's like, oh, it's just Diablo Light, it's a Diablo knockoff, but it's like, yeah, it's a Diablo knockoff, but it has a fun, interesting story that actually kind of engages you. And if it's not the characters, then it's kind of the world itself. The world kind of has a very interesting feel to it. You as Van Helsing with Lady Katarina just trying to take back Borgovia in the first game, and then stopping a civil war and coup in the second one, and then the third game it comes round robin where Van Helsing ends up trying to stop the ultimate evil. And so I find that interesting that all 3 games overlap each other to tell one continuous story, and a story that doesn't feel like it's forced. That's kind of the cool part of these games. It's not forced. They literally expound upon each other, one after the other. And I'm hoping that there is a 4th game if they do a 4th game. If they don't, I'm okay with them just making a trilogy, because, I just find it cool that they created an entire, universe within 3 games and one continuous story that it kind of engages you a little bit in, okay, what's going to happen to Van Helsing next? And, are we ever going to get the answers to Lady Katarina? And we kind of do in the 3rd game. But they still leave some stuff for a possible 4th game. And I kind of like that. And I'm kind of curious if Abraham Van Helsing is dead, or if he's still alive and we get to see Van Helsing after he's long since retired. I would kind of like to see that. And have an interaction between son and father. But anyway, not only you, Lewis, but for everybody else, I'm going to stop the video right here. I've gone on for an hour and a half explaining the lore of this entire game series. And also, I'm hungry. I'm kind of starting to get the shakes. So I'm going to go make myself a sandwich, or see if there's something I can dig out of the fridge. But anyway, guys, I'm going to stop the video right here. I hope you guys enjoyed, this hour and a half chill stream and me just kind of running through the game, just kind of messing around, fighting foes and all that stuff and talking about the story and the lore. And that hopefully a lot of you guys who are, like myself, PS4 players, are going to kind of look into this game and kind of just play for yourself. Or at the very least, you know, go on YouTube and just like watch full playthroughs of the games and just kind of enjoy it and immerse yourself the same way that I kind of have with these. But anyway, guys, I will stop the stream/video right here, and I will see you guys in the next video. I probably will continue where I left off in Jak and Daxter, because I want to strike while the iron's hot in finishing that particular series. And I will see you guys in the next one. So take care, have a good one, and I'm off to go get some food.